And frankly, it would be better for British interests to give up its seat to India. Not only do you get the friendship of India, but it frees up the UK to act independently, because in the Security Council, essentially the UK has become a satellite state of the United States, and everyone knows it. And it's sad. It's sad to see a great country like the United Kingdom behave like a satellite state, incapable of disagreeing in any way with the United States.
No, and also, of course, there's the economic arguments. Of course, the perhaps a sense of history coming full circle, that a country which once colonized India is now, of course, India emerging as an economic power, the third largest economy. But there also remains the fact that India has challenges on its path of becoming from an emerging economy to actually becoming a developed economy. That's something which is on the political agenda for now, but challenges remain. And many say, let's look at other ways of judging it, because otherwise, how can you say it just judge India on GDP and not look at per capita income? Your views on that?
Well, I would say at the end of the day, what matters is the size of your GDP, not your per capita income. Let me give you one statistic that illustrates this. Mm-hmm. In the year 1980, the combined GDP of the European Union countries was 8 times bigger than China. 8 times bigger, 1980. Today, they are about the same size. By 2050, the European Union will be half the size of Europe. Can you imagine? Europe going from being 8 times bigger to China to becoming half the size of China. Now, of course, China's GDP will continue to remain lower than that of Europe. But functionally, China is now a much larger, more powerful actor than all of Europe. And this is part of a dramatic global shift away from the West to the rest. Now, many countries in the rest may have lower per capita GDPs, but what matters at the end of the day is the size of your economy, because that will determine your place in the global hierarchy. And certainly in PPP terms now, number 1 is China, number 2 is United States, number 3 is India. Mm-hmm. And that's why these are the 3 most powerful countries in the world today.
You've made that point in other in your essays, etc., that this whole, in a sense, the West having lost control of the world, the crisis of leadership in the West, and how the global South and the whole shift of power is really what's going to define geopolitics, not just now, but in the decades and century to come. You, of course, have written extensively on the Asian century. Many observers have said that this could be the Indian century. Tell us why you think the West is in a crisis of, say, leadership, geopolitical strategy, and why you think there's been this shift of balance of power.
Well, the West clearly has got to accept that its capacity to dominate the world in the way that it could in the past is over. I mean, it's hard to believe this, right, Sonia? 100 years ago, in the year 1924, 100,000 Englishmen could rule over 300 million of our ancestors, the Indians. I find that quite amazing. 100,000 Englishmen ruling 300 million Indians? How is that possible? But it happened. It was real. The West was just so incredibly powerful. But the world has come full circle now. And the West now represents 12% of the world's population. The rest make up 88%. And I already illustrated by comparing Europe's GNP with China's GNP. The relative share of the GNP of the Western countries is going down. Let me give you another comparison. Mm-hmm. Okay, in the year 2000, roughly around then, the combined GNP of the G7 countries, representing the West, was 2.5 times bigger than the BRICS countries in PPP terms. Now G7 is smaller than BRICS. See, that's how times have changed. And Absolutely. So the intelligent thing for the West to do is to adapt intelligently and thoughtfully. And I must emphasize here, I don't speak here as an enemy of the West. I speak here as a friend of the West, trying to persuade both the Europe and United States that it would be wiser for them to share power, to share control of international institutions with the countries of the global South. And, for example, why do we have this absurd rule that says that to become the head of the IMF, you must be a European. To become the head of the World Bank, you must be an American citizen. Why not allow Asians to run these institutions? Because the fastest growing economies in the world are not European, not American, but Asian economies. So these are examples of how we must adapt to the 21st century. And the 21st century, I want to emphasize, will be the Asian century, because it will be the rise of not just China and India, but other Asian powers too. And one small point I'd like to make here is that Indians should pay special attention to Southeast Asia, to the 10 ASEAN countries. Because, 9 out of the 10 Southeast Asian countries have an Indic base in their culture. For 2,000 years, India has been very close to Southeast Asia. And Southeast Asia is emerging as a major growth pole in the world also. And I'll just give you one more statistic that I think every Indian should be aware of. In the year 2000, out of the 3.5 billion people who live in the three growth poles, the CIA, China, India, ASEAN. CIA doesn't mean Central Intelligence Agency. It means China, India, ASEAN. Out of the 3.5 billion people living in the CIA countries, only 150 million people enjoy middle-class living standards. Today, out of 3.5 billion, by 2020, the number hit 1.5 billion. It went up 10 times in 20 years.
No, the
and by
numbers
2030,
yes,
and by 2030, it will be 2.5 to 3 billion.
The numbers are, the scale is actually staggering. And what I wanted to ask, because you made that point also about Western ideas and thoughts, which tend to have dominated the world view because of the earlier dominance.